I started to unknowingly use a system to not only make a full recovery, but run out of the hospital.
Everyone, welcome to Time to Thrive. This is Bethany Meadows, your host. Today's guest is someone whose story will move and motivate you in equal measure. Nick Prefontaine is a top motivational speaker named by Yahoo Finance in 2022. He is a three-time best-selling author and the founder and CEO of Common Goal. After surviving a life-altering snowboarding accident at just age 14, Nick defied the odds and learned to walk, talk, and eat again using the very same step system he now teaches others to help them navigate trauma and unlock their full potential. Through his powerful storytelling and resilience, Nick inspires audiences to persevere and thrive no matter the challenge. Welcome to the show, Nick.
So excited to be here, Bethany. This is right up my alley.
I'm excited that you're here. Super random question. Pick a number between 1 and 5.
4.
4. Did you have a favorite teacher or a teacher who made a big impact on your life?
I did. My senior year in high school, I took a class called economics, and my economics teacher my senior year, and it wasn't really the class wasn't about anything to do with school. It was totally different, other than um, what went on in that class and what we learned about. It was just so different and outside, and I loved it. And that teacher I really connected with, and a lot of the principles and things that he was sharing with us then, I still do in my own life. So, yeah, he definitely had a big impact on me.
Yeah, I have had a few teachers that I can look back on too, and I mean, they listened or they encouraged or they did something that really resonated with you, even in like kindergarten.
Yeah.
I just wonder if they know now. Like, do they know the difference that they made? You never get the chance really to tell them, but your story of recovery is nothing short of miraculous. And I just wondered if you could share a little bit about that and maybe we can get into more of the mindset and how that played a role in your ability to overcome overwhelming odds.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'd love to. And that's what I'm excited to share today. So my story all goes back to in eighth grade. I was at ski club with my friends. And on the way to the mountain, my friends and I had all my buddies and I had all brought our snowboard gear. I was a snowboarder. And to get ready on the bus so we wouldn't miss a precious moment once we got to the mountain. And unlike the rest of our class, which they waited till I got to the mountain to get ready and wasted time, we got to the mountain and we were ready to go. So we hit the chairlift right off the bat. And then on the ride up, we noticed, Bethany, that it was very icy because it had been raining earlier in the day. So people were wiping out everywhere. However, the chairlift went right over the train park where all of the jumps were. And I knew as soon as I saw it that I had to go off the biggest jump in the terrain park. So got to the top, buckled into my snowboard, took a breath of that crisp winter air, and confidently charged towards that jump with all my speed. And then going up to the jump, I caught the edge of my snowboard on the snow going up to the jump, and that kind of threw me off balance. I was going too fast to be able to avoid going off the jump. Um, and the next thing I know, that was the last thing really that I remember. So I was told that I landed on my head, and
Oh wow.
I wasn't wearing a helmet. Because of the severity of my injury, they wanted to bring a helicopter to the mountain to rush me to the hospital. However, they couldn't because it was too windy. So they sent in an ambulance. And out of all the paramedics in the area, there was only one who could intubate right on the spot. And I needed that to be able to breathe. And he was one of the paramedics that showed up to the mountain that day. And there are still several things that I can't explain because of the accident. And now I know one of them is the reason why I'm here with you and your audience today, your listeners today. So, no matter the severity of your crisis, your decision to take action is your first step. So that was the first thing. The right paramedic showed up at the mountain. The second thing, I learned that although I wasn't wearing a helmet, the pair of goggles that I had on, um, they were very thick with a lot of padding. So a lot of maybe people are listening to this, the audio, and they can't see it, but I'm making a motion like right over my forehead where my goggles would be, and that's where I had them. And they were thick with a lot of padding. So not only I learned that not only did they brace my fall, but as I continued to roll down the mountain and continued to hit my head, with each impact, they moved to cushion each blow between my head and the ice. So the third thing, once I got to the hospital, I was out. I was in a coma, partially induced coma in the intensive care unit, unable to communicate with anyone. And each time the doctors would come into my room to share the not so positive news, not so positive news, not so positive news, if anyone can relate that has had any kind of a traumatic experience or an acute experience going to the hospital, they can't paint you a rosy picture. They have to give you the worst case scenario. So the doctors came into my ICU room, and the only people that were allowed in there were my parents. And they started to share right in front of me what happened and what the prognosis was and everything. And my mom stopped them and she said, "No, no, not in front of him." Because she understood that even though I was in a coma, I was still taking in information. So she made the doctors step outside the room. And then once they were outside the room, that's where they shared with my parents that there was a good chance that I probably wouldn't walk, talk, or eat on my own ever again. And credit to my parents, they took the information, thanked the doctors, and then this allowed me to treat it like any other situation. So once I was aware of my surroundings, I was really in the coma for 3 months. I mean 3 weeks, excuse me. I don't remember a month because it was a partially induced coma because they had to wait for the swelling to come down in my brain. So I don't remember a month. And then once those memories start a month after my accident, it just because none of this outside information of I'm probably not going to be able to walk, talk, or eat again got through to my mind. It just allowed me to treat it like any other situation. So I got up, did the best that I could, and I kept getting better every day. And it was at this point that I started to unknowingly use a system to not only make a full recovery, but run out of the hospital. And that's the step system that you were alluding to in your in the intro. So I'll give a 10,000-foot view of the step system for sake of time here, and then if anyone's interested, I can give them ways that they can get the whole thing, download the whole thing for free at the end. So STEP is an acronym. It stands for support. So make sure you have the support of your family and friends right from the beginning. And this is going to have you falling back on relationships that you built prior to your setback. T is trust. So trust that once you take your first step, your next step's always going to be available to you. This also starts with trusting that voice that you have within inside of yourself. Um, that calling that you have inside of yourself. You have to tune into that and follow that. And it was interesting how I can illustrate this is right around that time. So a month after I was transported to the rehab hospital, I was in the coma for a month, and then month later transported to a rehab hospital. If you remember, I still couldn't walk, talk, or eat again. However, I overheard my parents, and I can remember this vividly. I was in a wheelchair. I still wasn't verbal. If anything, it was a whisper or mouthing words. And I overheard my parents talking with my team of therapists and doctors. And they were saying, okay, what do we need to do to make sure Nick makes a full recovery? I heard in the back of my head, no, you're going to run out or you're going to run out. Not, I didn't hear the no. I just heard you're going to run out. So then running out became our common goal. And I was able to communicate that with my parents and the rest of my team. And then that's what we were working towards every single day and every single week. So back to the acronym, E is energy. So maintaining your energy allows your body's natural ability to be able to heal itself. Medication has the potential to get in the way of that. So obviously within reason here that first night in the hospital cost $250,000. So if it wasn't for modern medicine, I wouldn't be here today. However, there's a use, a time, and a place for everything. So a month after my accident, when I came out of the ICU, was the time that we needed to allow the body to heal itself. And this is so important that I mentioned this right around this time when I was transported to the rehab hospital. I wasn't cleared to walk yet. I was still in a not in a coma. I was still in a wheelchair, and I wasn't cleared to walk yet. I was within like a week though of being able to uh, get cleared to walk on my own. And I got up in the middle of the night, and I had to go to the bathroom. Well, I always had either my dad or an uncle or my grandfather stay with me in the night in a cot next to my bed. So I woke up and I tried to get my grandfather's attention, and he couldn't hear me. So I was like, all right, well, I'll do it myself. So I hobbled my way to the bathroom, was able to, nothing happened, and I was fine. I was safe. However, the next day the hospital found out and they freaked out. And they're like, well, we can't have this liability and everything. And what we're going to do is give him this many cc's of this medication, that many cc's of this other medication before bed, and that should calm him down. Well, my mom heard this and she said, no, you're not. Just ask him not to do that. And I feel like if I didn't have an advocate there supporting me,
Mhm.
I wouldn't have been able to advocate for myself. So they would have just medicated me. I know doctors and nurses do heroic work. I'm not downplaying that. But the if I didn't have anyone there, they would have just medicated me to make their jobs easier. I feel like, for lack of a better term. So P is persistence. So once you take your first step, keep getting up every day and taking your next step, no matter how small. And by continuing to move forward every day, you are building an unstoppable momentum. So if you fast forward, uh, less than 60 days later, I did realize my goal of running out of the hospital. And then I had to get tutored all summer long in order to continue on to high school with the rest of my class. And because I know I want to hit, there are a few things I want to make sure that we hit on. So it's a little surreal to me that Bethany, only 18 months later, after finishing rehab, so I had to go get tutored all summer long, and then I had another 6 months of outpatient therapy. So it wasn't like I was done once I was out of the hospital. I had to get
Right.
another 6 months. And then after that, it's a little surreal to me that only 18 months later, after finishing my rehab from my snowboarding accident and being in a coma, I got my start in real estate. And that was door knocking pre foreclosure doors or homeowners that have received the notice of default letter from the bank, meaning that they had missed a few payments and the bank hadn't foreclosed on the house yet. So I would go to these houses, and it was right around the time when I was getting my driver's license. My dad and his real estate investment company were playing with the idea of having someone, a bird dog, go and knock on these doors and see if I could schedule appointments for one of their investors to meet with them. So it was perfect for me because I was just getting my driver's license, and I grabbed the book off my dad's shelf, Robert Kiyosaki's Cash Flow Quadrant. That's what
Mhm.
really got my wheels turning. So I came to him and said I wanted to help out. So I would go to the areas where I could hit the most amount of these doors in a day. And I didn't consult anyone on this, but I would go to some like not so good areas of cities and just where I could do the most amount of doors in a day, just to get the most practice and the most reps. And I started after being flown out to California to shadow the number one person in the country at the time with my cousin. I started when I came back, I started seeing a lot of success while I was in high school and was able to book a lot of appointments for our investor. And that really, that was really my first kind of intro into doing anything business wise, other than manual labor and things like that. So then after high school, I got my real estate license. And ever since I got out of school, there has always been this back to that voice in the back of your head. So there's always been this voice in the back of my head that's always been saying, no matter what I'm doing, no matter how successful I'm being, like how much success I'm having, the voice is always saying, yeah, great. This is great, Nick. I'm happy you're able to like do well and everything. But what you really need to be doing is helping trauma victims through their trauma and thrive with the rest of their lives. So that voice has always been there. And so I was a realtor. For full time for 6 years, and then in 2014, still had my real estate license. My dad approached me and he wanted to know if I would help him. What He was an investor and he was buying properties at that time creatively. So without using any bank loans or big investor money or anything, he was buying homes creatively, and he was all these homes were accumulating, and he needed help with getting them on the market, not listing them, but getting them on the rent to own market and looking for a rent to own buyer. So at the end of 2014, started helping him with the marketing. And over the course of the next 13 months, 13, 14 months, my income totally shifted where I was making the majority of it with him as an investor. So it didn't make sense for me to keep my real estate license anymore. So I let that go in January of 2016. And then through our business, we started not only doing buying homes creatively, and then I would always work with all the buyers and sell them to rent home buyers, and kind of perfected a process that we have to put them through, the rent home buyers, so that when they get to the end of their rent own agreement, they're able to go ahead and qualify for their own loan, qualify for their own financing, and officially become the homeowner. Then we started helping associates all over the country. So not just doing our internal family business, but we started helping associates all over the country to implement the same tools, systems, and processes that have worked for us and had made us successful. And through that, I always had the opportunity, because we've been holding events since 2016. So I've always had the opportunity to tell my story on stage. And I always thought I was scratching that itch. I was satisfying that voice in the back of my head that was telling me I needed to help trauma victims through their, or if they have a life crisis, through their life crisis and thrive with the rest of their lives. And telling my story on stage is part of that. So I always thought I was satisfying that itch, so to speak. However, it wasn't really. I wasn't really doing it. So I mean, the most I had spoke was 10 or 15 minutes. Maybe 20 minutes was the max that I ever told my story at one of our events. And in 2019, someone heard me speak and tell my story. And at that time, that was the longest I had done. Like I said, it was only 15 or 20 minutes. But to me, that was a big deal. I was like, "Ooh, I had to really work at that." That was a big deal. She approached me after and said, "I'm not looking to steal you from your dad, and your real estate business. However, if you're ever looking to fine tune your message and bring it to another level so that you're able to have maximum impact, I can help introduce you to a few coaches and mentors that have helped me get started. So I wasn't ready at the time because I was still dealing with a voice issue, and we uh we don't have enough time today for me to go into details about this. But I developed a voice issue in at the end of 2012, and after I get, I would get Botox treatments from a voice specialist in Boston, combined with their higher level voice therapy, speech therapy. So in 2019, when this woman heard me speak for, like I said, the longest time that I had up to that point, um, I was still in the final throes of my voice issue. So my voice was like really, it was still strained. It was like hard to get the words out, if that makes sense. However, I was able to get through the talk, and she approached me after, and like I said, gave me her card, and I wasn't ready yet because I was still going through that voice issue. However, I always hung on to her card. So after the voice issue, more than a year and a half later, had worked its way out of my system, and thank God, no longer have an issue. As you can tell, I can speak fine. I don't have any strain or anything like that in my voice. I finally reached out to her, and the reason I reached out to her was because that voice in the back of my head just kept getting louder and louder and louder, and I I needed to do this. I needed to listen to that inner guidance, that voice. Um, and I thought reaching out to this person that gave me her card, Sharon, would help me do that. Well, Sharon introduced me to her mentor, who became my mentor, that I've now worked with for, 3.5 years. And from that first conversation that I had with Trisha, her name is Trisha Brook. From that first conversation, there has been no voice in the back of my head. So, what that's evidence to me of is that I'm doing exactly what I was put on this earth to do. So, with Trisha, she helped me launch my company, Common Goal, and helped me write several keynote talks that I now deliver for um, a lot of different organizations, but mainly at this point it's brain injury associations and other organizations that support individuals that are going through trauma all over the country. And to me, if someone would have told me back 5 years ago that this is what I'd be doing right now, because Bethany, now I give 50 and 60-minute keynote talks to these brain injury associations across the country or other organizations that support individuals that are going through trauma. And I'm now starting to branch out and do other organizations as well. But if you would have told me that 5 years ago, I would have told you that you were nuts, that you were crazy. And uh, the reason that I credit that and I credit that success to is because of coaches and mentors. So I couldn't have been able to do that on my own, and I'm so happy that I made the decision to work with her.
Well, I think something that a lot of our audience can relate to in your story is, um, having to move through and overcome. I mean, that's anybody who's started a business, they can relate to that voice in the back of their head that is saying, you should be doing this. But there's a lot of thing that holds entrepreneurs back, and that's fear. A fear of failure, fear of rejection, a fear of not being good enough, imposter syndrome. What would you say to those entrepreneurs in terms of addressing that? And how did you overcome your fear?
I think the fear that's a great question. I think the fear, um, I was afraid of what would happen to me if I didn't listen to that voice.
Mm,
Because if I look backwards, I've already had some experience of kind of pushing that voice down and not listening to it. And that was right after I got out of high school. So I graduated high school in 2007. My dad connected me with one of his friends that he went to college with for to help me get started in speaking, and he told me to go to Toastmasters and just little things like that to help me get started. Well, at the time, I was like, I didn't have a long term perspective. So I was like, all right, well, I'll try this for a few months. If it doesn't work, I'll just go into real estate. So that's exactly what I did. I only dabbled with it for a few months, and then I went into getting my starting to study to get my real estate license. Um, then if I kind of think about it, the being a realtor and then working as an investor with my dad, I mean, during all that process of, it was especially, I developed the voice issue when I was dealing when I was when I was a realtor. I The way I look at that and the way I view that is the reason that that happened was because I wasn't listening to that voice. So to me, um, it's like I had to listen to that voice.
So it's scarier not to listen to voice than it is to push through
Yeah,
and persevere with that. I one of
exactly.
the other things that you've said is limitless potential lies on the other side of trauma. And a lot of small business owners kind of identify in the lessons and their struggles, but how can they use that for growth? How can they use the thing that they had to overcome as fuel for growing, either personally or professionally?
Sure, because I think once you get through it, so it's happened several times in my life. So like I said, I shared the my snowboarding accident and then getting through that. And I really think because I was so young, I was only 14 years old when I got into my snowboarding accident. I just look back on it like, yeah, anyone would do that. And I just that happened to me and I dealt with it. It was just part of my childhood, part of growing up. Well, the older I get and the more people that I meet, I'm learning that that's not so normal. Um, that when you're dealt with something, you deal with it and then get through to the other side. Um, and then I think the voice issue, I think I'm more proud of the voice issue because overcoming that rather because I developed it in 2012 and I didn't get my last Botox treatment until February 13th of 2020. So I dealt with that for 7 or 8 years, and really it was probably closer to 10 if you think of it. Um, I think like I said, I'm more proud of that. But the reason why is your limitless potential is lying on the other side of your trauma or setback because once you're free of that, um, you, the world's your oyster, so to speak.
Right.
There are no limits because once you overcome that, whatever particular thing it is, once you overcome that, and I feel this way, um, there's nothing that you can throw at me that's going to stop me.
That would be worse than what you already went through. I
Exactly.
mean, I relate to that in my own story too. I went through, and my audience is familiar with my story, so I won't reiterate it here. But coming on the other side of that, it makes you feel more invincible than
Mhm.
before
Yep.
because you feel like, wow, I am strong. Because you look at, I did come over that, and I came out better. And so anything you've got for me, I can handle. I can,
Exactly.
so it does make you a little bit more confident. You've built your business around your personal mission. What advice would you have for entrepreneurs trying to align their business with a deeper sense of purpose?
To me, I think it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing because I think the reason that you start this business or you start any business is because that purpose, if that makes sense. So I think whether you know it or not, you started that business for a reason, and whatever challenge you're going through isn't isn't going to influence or isn't going to stop you from going forward. Um, like I said, it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. I think at least for me, it was I I can't not do this. I have to do this. And that's said with like for the rest of my life too. I'm not this isn't something that I'm going to try for another couple months. And if it doesn't work out, I'm just going to go back to real estate. Like I'm still doing real estate. I'm going to do real estate for the rest of my life. However, I can't stop this. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life too. Um, so I think the purpose comes first, and if you don't think that you have a purpose, if you're out there listening to this and you started the business for other reasons, you don't think you have a purpose, I think you do. You just need to reevaluate it.
Yeah, that's good advice. And speaking of advice, if you could give one piece of helpful advice for a small business owner right now who feels stuck or overwhelmed, what would that look like?
So, the easiest cure for if you feel stuck, and if you feel stuck, also, at the end, well, actually, you know, we're like kind of close to the end, so I can give you information about the ebook. So this is one of the things, Bethany, that I say all the time, as we're wrapping up this interview, is that if you're feeling as a business owner or in any way, if you're feeling stuck or overwhelmed or you don't know what to do, you can head over to my website, nickprefontaine.com/step and download the entire step system for free today. So, what we went over is just a 10,000-foot view of the step system. But when you download Step, the ebook, you're going to learn all about support, trust, energy, and persistence. And if you're feeling stuck, it'll be a great first step. And then once you take your first step, your next step's always possible.
Perfect. Thanks, Nick. I appreciate you telling your story. I mentioned to you before we went on the show that I used to host a radio show um, called Dancing in the Rain, where people come on and tell their story of overcoming something. And y- a lot of the guests I had on the show had never shared their story before. And so I think that's a something and I think it's healing. I think it's healing to be able to take something that was so painful, that was trauma, that could have destroyed you and stand up and say, I am stronger, I am better because of that experience. And that encourages others who are going through a hard time. And that's what you've committed your life to. So I give you, honor for that. And I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story.
Thank you so much. This has been fun.